Regarding the anatomy of the back, in this lecture we will talk about the muscles of the back. Muscles of the back consist of mainly of three layers. The superficial layer is formed of trapezius, latissimus dorsi, levator scapulae, rhomboids major, and rhomboids minor muscle. When you remove this superficial layer, you will find the middle layer consists of serratus posterior superior muscle and serratus posterior inferior muscle. Removing them, you will find the deep layer, and the deep layer consists of the most deeper one is interspinalis and intertransversalis muscle. Superficial to it, you will find transversospinalis muscle consists of two muscles, is the rotators and multifidus muscle. You will find the muscles of the suboccipital triangle, semispinalis muscle, erector spinae muscle, and the erector spinae muscle consists of three parts: iliocostalis, the lateral part, longissimus, the middle part, and spinalis, the most medial. Regarding the superficial and the intermediate group, they are extrinsic muscles of the back. They originate embryologically from other locations differ from the back. That's why they are innervated by the ventral primary rami of the spinal nerves. The superficial one, they are muscles related to the upper limb. The intermediate one, muscles related to the ribs. So the superficial one are involved in movement of the upper limb. However, the intermediate one involved in the respiratory function. Regarding the deeper group, they are intrinsic muscle. They are innervated of the back. They are innervated by posterior rami of the spinal nerves, and they are directly related to the of the vertebral column. Let's start with the deep layer. The most deeper layer is interspinalis and interspinalis and intertransversalis muscle. This is intertransversalis and this is interspinalis muscle. Interspinalis muscle joins the adjacent borders of the spinous processes. However, intertransversalis muscle joins the adjacent border of the transverse processes. They are well developed in the upper part of the vertebral column. Moving to transversospinalis, intermediate layer. Transversospinalis, this group of muscles start running from transverse process of a spine to from transverse process to a spine. That's why they are called transversospinalis. There are two types. Rotators muscles, they are small muscles, but multifidus muscles, they are larger muscles. Rotator muscles, those muscles, rotators muscle, the small one, they are confined mainly to the thoracic spine where the pure rotation can occur. They extend from base of transverse process of a vertebra to root of the spinous process of the vertebra above. However, multifidus muscle, the larger one, it starts from base of transverse process to spine of the vertebra second or vertebra above. So multifidus is slope upward. Multifidus is present starting from the back of the sacrum, mammillary processes of the lumbar vertebrae, and the transverse processes of the thoracic vertebrae, articular processes of the cervical vertebrae. So it runs on the whole length of the vertebral column, starting from the sacrum till the cervical vertebrae. Their insertion into the spinous process of the second or third vertebra above their level of origin. They start, as we have mentioned, in the sacrum until the back of the neck. Moving to semispinalis muscle. Semispinalis muscle, it looks like transversospinalis. It lies on the surface of the multifidus and it looks like them. Their fiber is arising from also transverse process and slope upward to be inserted into the spines. They extend from lower thoracic region to the skull. The semispinalis thoracis muscle in this region, semispinalis thoracis muscle extend from transverse process of the lower thoracic vertebrae, and each one is inserted into the spine process of the 6 or more vertebra above. Semispinalis cervicis, this one, it arises as continuity but at higher level of the semispinalis thoracis. It starts from the transverse process of the upper thoracic, starting from the first thoracic till the sixth thoracic, and also articular processes of the cervical vertebrae, and inserted into the spines of the cervical vertebrae, starting from the second one till the seventh one in the concavity of the spine. Semispinalis capitis, the most upper one, it will reach the skull. This is the most powerful. It arises from transverse process like semispinalis surfaces. It starts from transverse process of the upper thoracic vertebrae, articular processes of the lower four cervical vertebrae, but the insertion is different. It is inserted into the occipital bone. The occipital bone near the midline between the superior and the inferior nuchal line. It is one of the chief extensor of the head. It contains large plexus of veins inside the muscle and this is the whole picture of the muscles of the back. You will find the semispinalis thoracis, you will find the semispinalis cervicis, and you will find the semispinalis capitis. Moving now to the most superficial muscle, the most superficial layer of the deep groove is the erectorospinae muscle, and the erectorospinae muscle is the extended most powerful muscle. It extends downward from deep to the lumbar fascia, from back of the sacrum, from the inner side of the iliac crest, and this thick muscle will slope upward and slightly laterally, and it will be divided into three bundles. The lateral one is iliocostalis, and medial to it you will find longissimus muscle. Let's start with iliocostalis muscle. It starts from the back of the sacrum and iliac crest and the lumbar fascia till the lower angle, till the angle of the lower sixth rib, and this is iliocostalis lumborum. Then starting from this new attachment, lower sixth ribs, till the angle of the upper sixth ribs, this is the second part, iliocostalis thoracis. And starting from the new part, the angle of the upper sixth ribs till the transverse process of the lower cervical vertebrae, this is the third part, which is iliocostalis cervicis. The most lateral part, medial to it, longissimus muscle. Longissimus bundle also starts from the back of the sacrum, from the iliac crest, and it will pass upward to be inserted into the gutter between the transverse. It will be most medial to it, so it will not be attached to the angle. It will be attached in the gutter between the transverse process and the ribs, and this is the longissimus thoracis muscle. Then at this insertion, a new fiber will arise, and those fibers will pass up to transverse process of the cervical vertebrae, and this is longissimus cervicis. Then longissimus capitis arises from the transverse process of the lower four cervical vertebrae and inserted into the mastoid process due to splenius capitis. Moving to the most medial part of the erectorospinae muscle, it is called the spinalis muscle or splenius muscle. It is the most medial part of erectorospinae muscle. Its fiber run along the spine. That's why it is called the spinalis, and they are small and indefinite. This one is splenius. The splenius is the first one in the neck. It arises from the upper thoracic spine process and also supraspinous ligament and also ligamentum nuchae, and it will be inserted into the fibers will be sloped laterally. Upward and laterally to form two muscles. One is called the splenius capitis muscle, and the splenius capitis muscle will be inserted into mastoid process and the lateral third of the superior nuchal line, and the second one will be inserted into the transverse process of the upper three cervical vertebrae, and it is called splenius cervicis muscle, and it lies deep to the levator. This is a whole diagram of the muscles of the back. Regarding the back of the neck. Back of the neck consists of muscles connecting the skull to the spine and the pectoral girdle. In the midline, there is ligamentum nuchae. This ligamentum nuchae is attached to the external occipital crest, external occipital protuberance, and the spine, the pivot spine of the cervical vertebrae, and the tubercle of the last cervical vertebra, the seventh one. You will find trapezius, you will find sternomastoid. Deep to the trapezius and sternomastoid lies the splenius, and below the and deep to the splenius there is longissimus capitis and semispinalis capitis. When all muscles are removed, the deeper structures of the back of the neck are seen to be divided by the prominent process of the second cervical vertebra, the axis. Below this level you will find semispinalis surfaces. Above this level you will find the suboccipital triangle. What are the muscles of the suboccipital triangle? There are first muscle, rectus capitis posterior minor. Rectus capitis posterior minor takes origin from the posterior tubercle of the atlas to be inserted below the inferior nuchal line, the medial area below the inferior nuchal line. Rectus capitis posterior major, it arises from the axis of the spine of the axis to be inserted laterally below the inferior nuchal line also. Inferior oblique muscle arises from the spine of the axis to the transverse process of the atlas, and the superior oblique arises from the transverse process of atlas to be inserted into the occipital bone in the area between the superior and the inferior nuchal line. Those are the muscles of the suboccipital triangle. The suboccipital triangle, its roof is formed by semispinalis capitis and longissimus capitis. Its floor is formed by the posterior arch of atlas and the posterior atlanto-occipital membrane. Its content is vertebral body. You will find that this is its boundaries. First you will find that this is the superior oblique forming the lateral boundary. This is the inferior oblique forming the medial boundary. This is the rectus capitis posterior major forming the medial boundary. Its content are the vertebral artery, third part of vertebral artery, dorsal ramus of C1 and suboccipital venous. This is the suboccipital triangle. This is posterior arch of atlas, vertebral artery, dorsal ramus of C1. Moving to, now we have finished the deeper layer of the muscles of the back, which they are called intrinsic muscles of the back. We will move to extrinsic muscles of the back, the superficial layer. Trapezius muscle originates from the medial third of the superior nuchal line, the spine of medial third of the superior nuchal line, the external occipital protuberance, the ligamentum nuchae, the spine of all cervical vertebrae, this line, all cervical vertebrae, the spine of all thoracic vertebrae. They will be inserted into, its upper fibers are inserted into the lateral third of the clavicle posterior border. Their middle fibers are inserted into the medial border of the acromion and upper lip of the crest of the spine. The lower fibers are inserted onto the tubercle of the crest of the spine on the lower border of the spine. Trapezius muscle are supplied by the spinal accessory nerve, and they receive or proprioceptive sensation from third and fourth cervical nerves. The upper fibers elevate the clavicle, so it elevates the shoulder girdle. Lower fibers depress the medial part of the clavicle of the scapula. The middle fibers retract the scapula. When the upper fibers and lower fibers are acting together, it will rotate the scapula in abduction more than 90 degrees. Regarding latissimus dorsi muscle, this one, it originates from below, from the spine of the lower thoracic vertebrae, from the sulculumbar fascia, from the inner lip of iliac, outer lip of iliac crest and the lower foreribs, and posterior surface of the inferior angle of the scapula. Its insertion, it will be inserted into the floor of the bicipital groove. It is supplied by thoracodorsal nerve. Its action, it will perform extension, adduction, medial rotation of the shoulder joint. It draw the arm from above the head. It help in climbing, it help in forced. Regarding the levatory scapulae, rhomboids minor, rhomboids major, they all takes origin from the vertebral column. They all inserted into the medial border of the scapula, the dorsal surface of the medial border of the scapula. The levatory scapulae starting from the upper angle till the root of the spine, the rhomboids minor opposite the root of the spine, and the rhomboids major starting from the root of the spine till the inferior angle of the scapula. They are all supplied by one nerve, dorsal scapular nerve to rhomboids. Their action all help in fixation of the scapula, help in retraction of the scapula. The levator one elevate the scapula, however the rhomboids rotate the scapula down. regarding the origin of the levator scapulae, it originates from the transverse process of the upper four cervical vertebrae and inserted, as we have mentioned, into the dorsal surface of the medial border of the scapula, starting from the upper angle till the root of the spine. Rhomboids minor originates from the ligamentum nuchae and spine of the last cervical vertebra and first thoracic vertebra, insertion into the dorsal surface of the medial border of the scapula opposite the root of the spine. However, rhomboids major takes origin from the spine from second, third, fourth thoracic spine and inserted into the medial border of the scapula, its dorsal surface, starting from the root of the spine till the inferior angle of the scapula. So this is the superficial muscles of the back: trapezius, rhomboids, and the levator scapulae. Trapezius, latissimus dorsi, and the three deeper to them: the levator scapulae, rhomboids minor, and rhomboids major muscle. And that's all for the muscles of the back. Thank you.